When 8-year-old Ethan Coleman saw the leather vest at a rest stop outside Phoenix and whispered to the stranger wearing it that his dad had patches just like those, he had no idea the man he'd approached had actually ridden with his father before the accident 6 months earlier that had taken Jake Hammer Coleman away forever. The discovery that this grieving boy had been told to stop talking about his dad, combined with the realization that the Iron Valley Motorcycle Club hadn't even known Hammer had a son, would prompt a single phone call that brought 17 bikers to a clubhouse within 40 minutes, transforming one child's isolation into belonging and proving that brotherhood doesn't end with death when the family left behind still needs it. The Chevron station sat where Route 89 met Interstate 17, one of those practical crossroads for travelers heading toward Sedona or Flagstaff or deeper into Arizona's high country. It was mid-afternoon on a Saturday in October, the kind of perfect fall day where the sky stretched impossibly blue and the temperature had finally dropped below 90 degrees. Derek Morrison pulled his Road King up to the pumps, grateful for the chance to stretch after 3 hours of highway riding. He was 46 years old, road captain for Iron Valley MC, with a salt and pepper beard and the kind of weathered face that came from 2 decades of riding in all conditions. His black leather vest carried the club's patches, a motorcycle silhouette against mountain ridges, along with various rockers and pins that mapped out his life. Military service showing Marine Corps deployment, a prisoner of war, and missing in action, flag, Arizona rocker, road captain designation. He'd been heading north for a weekend ride when his bike started running rough, making this fuel stop necessary to check things out. Derek was kneeling beside his motorcycle inspecting the engine when he heard the small voice behind him. "Excuse me, mister." He looked up and found himself facing a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, small and thin with dark blonde hair that needed cutting. The kid wore a faded superhero shirt, shorts with grass stains, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His face was covered in freckles, and his blue eyes were red-rimmed like he'd been crying recently. In his small hands, he clutched something, a piece of fabric that Derek couldn't quite make out. "Yeah, buddy," Derek said gently, wiping oil from his hands onto a rag. "What can I do for you?" The boy took 2 hesitant steps closer, his eyes fixed on Derek's vest with an intensity that seemed unusual for a child. His small hands gripped whatever he was holding tighter, knuckles going white with the pressure. "My dad had patches like yours," the boy said, his voice small and shaky. "On his jacket, the one he wore all the time. He looked just like you do." Derek felt something shift in his chest at those words. Past tense, had patches. The boy nodded and Derek could see him fighting back tears with everything he had. He was in a motorcycle club. He had the leather vest with all the patches and everything. "He looked like you." The boy's voice cracked slightly. "He died 6 months ago." Derek's throat tightened. He stood up slowly, giving the kid space, and asked as gently as he knew how, "I'm real sorry to hear that, son. What was your dad's name?" "Jake. Jake Coleman. People called him Hammer because he was really strong and could do anything." The boy's face crumpled slightly. "He used to take me on rides on his motorcycle. He said when I got bigger he'd teach me everything about bikes and I could be in his club too, but then he couldn't finish the sentence." Derek felt like someone had punched him hard in the stomach. Jake Hammer Coleman. He knew that name, knew it well. Hammer had been Iron Valley MC out of the Tucson chapter before he'd relocated to Flagstaff about 3 years back. Derek had ridden with him maybe a dozen times over the years, knew him as a solid brother and a genuinely good man. And Derek had been at Hammer's funeral 6 months ago after that motorcycle accident on Route 17, when a drunk driver crossed the center line and Jake had died instantly. The funeral had drawn almost 200 bikers from across Arizona and neighboring states, but in all the chaos and grief of that day, Derek hadn't known Hammer had a son. Nobody had mentioned there was a little boy who'd lost his father. "Your dad was Hammer Coleman," Derek said carefully, "from Iron Valley MC Tucson chapter." The boy's eyes went wide with something like hope. "You knew him? You knew my dad?" "Yeah, buddy, I knew him." Derek knelt back down to the kid's eye level. "Your dad was a good man, a real good brother. What's your name?" Ethan Coleman." Derek noticed the boy's hands were still clutching that piece of fabric. Now he could see what it was. A patch. a worn leather patch showing the Iron Valley MC logo. "Is that your dad's patch?" Ethan nodded and held it out with trembling hands, like he was showing Derek something precious and fragile. "It's from his vest. After he died, Mom put his vest away in the closet and said I couldn't have it until I was older. But I took this patch off when she wasn't looking because I wanted to keep something of his with me. I carry it everywhere." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Sometimes I hold it and I can still smell him, like oil and leather and the cologne he always wore." Derek's eyes were burning. This kid had torn a patch off his dead father's vest because it was the only piece of his dad he was allowed to keep close. "Ethan, where's your mom right now?" "She's inside getting coffee. She doesn't like it when I talk about Dad. She says it makes her too sad and I need to move on. But I don't want to move on. I don't want to forget him." Ethan's tears were falling now, running down his freckled cheeks. "I miss him so much, and nobody understands. Mom won't talk about him. My grandparents say I need to be strong for Mom. My friends at school don't know what to say. It's like everyone wants to pretend he didn't exist. But he did exist. He was my dad, and he was the best dad in the whole world." The boy was sobbing now, and Derek did the only thing that made sense. He pulled Ethan into a hug, this small kid carrying grief too enormous for his small frame, who'd been told to be strong and move on when what he desperately needed was permission to grieve and remember. "Your dad existed," Derek said quietly, his own voice rough with emotion. "And he was one hell of a man. And you don't have to forget him. You don't ever have to move on. You get to miss him for as long as you need to. And anybody who tells you different doesn't understand what it means to lose someone you love this much." Ethan clung to Derek's vest the way he probably used to cling to his father's, sobbing into the leather while Derek just held him and let him cry for as long as he needed. After several minutes, Ethan pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve and looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cry all over you." "Don't apologize," Derek said firmly. "You've got every right to cry. You lost your dad. That's about the hardest thing in the world." He paused, looking at the patch in Ethan's hand. "Your dad would be real proud of you right now. You know that? Proud that you remember him. Proud that you keep that patch close. That's exactly what he would have wanted." "Really?" Ethan's voice carried so much hope it hurt to hear. "Really, and I'll tell you something else. Your dad's brothers, his club, we remember him too. We honor him. And that means we honor you because you're his son. You're part of his legacy." Ethan looked up at Derek with desperate hope building in his eyes. "Do you think," he hesitated, "do you think you could tell me about him? About what he was like with his club?" "Mom won't talk about any of it, and I want to know everything." Derek glanced toward the convenience store where he could see a woman inside at the coffee counter. She looked to be in her mid-30s with dark hair and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from grief and single parenthood combined. That must be Ethan's mother. He made a decision right there. "Ethan, I'm going to talk to your mom. And if she's okay with it, I want to call my club brothers. Some of them knew your dad real well, better than I did even. And I think they'd want to meet you. Would that be okay with you?" Ethan's face transformed completely. "Yes. Yes, please, I want to meet Dad's friends so bad." Derek stood and walked toward the convenience store. The woman, Sarah Coleman, he assumed, was paying for her coffee when she looked up and saw a large biker in a leather vest standing near her son. Her face went pale and then hard, and she rushed outside immediately. "Ethan, get away from him right now," she called out, her voice sharp with protective fear. "Mom, no, this is Derek. He knew Dad. He was in Dad's club." "I don't care, Ethan. Come here now." Sarah's voice was trembling, her coffee completely forgotten. Derek raised both hands in a peaceful gesture, keeping his distance. "Ma'am, I'm Derek Morrison, Iron Valley MC. I rode with your husband. I was at his funeral. Your son saw my vest and came over to talk. He showed me Jake's patch." Sarah's face crumpled like she'd been struck. "He took that patch off Jake's vest. I've been looking for it for weeks. Ethan, you can't just keep taking his things. It hurts too much to see them." Her voice broke completely. "Mrs. Coleman," Derek said as gently as he could manage, "can we talk for just a minute, please?" Sarah looked at him, at her son, at the patch in Ethan's hand, and some of the hardness left her face. She just looked tired and sad and completely overwhelmed by everything. "What do you want?" Your son is grieving and he's carrying his father's memory and nobody's letting him talk about it. He needs his dad's brothers. He needs people who knew Jake, who can tell him stories, who can help him understand that his father mattered to more people than just family. Iron Valley MC would like to do that for him if you'll let us. Sarah's eyes filled with tears that started spilling over. I can't keep reliving it. Every single time Ethan talks about Jake, I have to relive losing him all over again. I have to see that motorcycle lying on its side and the police officers at my door telling me he was gone. And she stopped, breathing hard. I know I'm handling this all wrong. I know Ethan needs to grieve. But I don't know how to help him do that without drowning in my own grief. You don't have to do it alone, Derek said quietly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Iron Valley MC takes care of our brothers' families. Always. We should have been there for you and Ethan these past 6 months, and I'm sorry we weren't. We didn't know Jake had a son. We didn't know you needed us. But we know now, and we want to help if you'll let us. Sarah looked at Ethan, who was watching her with desperate hope written all over his face. What exactly are you proposing? I want to call my club brothers who knew Jake. I want them to meet Ethan. I want to tell him stories about his dad. And I want to make sure you both know that Jake's memory is honored, that his son is part of our family, and that you're not alone in this anymore. Derek paused. And I want to give Ethan something I think Jake would have wanted him to have. Sarah hesitated for a long moment and then nodded slowly. Okay, but not here in some gas station parking lot. Derek pulled out his phone. How about the Iron Valley Clubhouse? It's about 20 minutes from here. You could follow me there. There are photos of Jake on the walls, brothers who can tell stories, and a whole community that wants to meet Hammer's son. Sarah agreed after another moment of hesitation. Derek made calls while they prepared to leave, first to the Iron Valley Flagstaff chapter president, and then to the Tucson chapter where Jake had ridden for years, reaching out to every brother who'd known Hammer Coleman personally. Hammer's kid is coming to the clubhouse, Derek said into each call. 8 years old. Grieving his dad hard. Needs his father's brothers right now. Everyone who can make it needs to be there in 30 minutes. They arrived at the Iron Valley Clubhouse, a converted garage on the outskirts of Flagstaff, with motorcycles lined up outside and the club's flag flying. Already 18 bikers had gathered, brothers from both Flagstaff and Tucson chapters who'd dropped everything the moment they heard Hammer's son needed them. When Ethan walked into the clubhouse with his mother, still holding that worn patch in his small hands, the bikers stood. There was a moment of heavy silence as these grown men, hardened by years of riding and life, looked at this small boy who was the living image of their dead brother. Then Bull, Hammer's best friend from the Tucson chapter, a massive man with a gray-streaked beard, stepped forward and knelt down to Ethan's level. "You look just like your old man," Bull said, his voice thick with emotion. "Same eyes, same stubborn chin. Your dad was my best friend for 12 years. I loved him like a brother." Ethan's eyes were huge as he took in this giant of a man. "You were Dad's best friend. He talked about you all the time. He called you Uncle Bull." Bull's face crumpled at those words. "He called me Uncle Bull." "Yeah," Ethan said. "He said you and him rode together all the time and you were like brothers. And that family wasn't just blood. It was who showed up when it mattered." Bull pulled Ethan into a bear hug, and this massive biker started crying while holding this small boy who carried his best friend's eyes and smile. Other brothers gathered around, and one by one they introduced themselves to Ethan. Men who'd ridden with Jake, who'd worked on bikes with him in the garage until 3 in the morning, who'd been there for the good times and the hard times and everything in between. They told stories about the time Jake had finished a 500-mile charity ride in pouring rain without complaining once, about how he could fix any motorcycle with nothing but duct tape and pure stubbornness, about his laugh that could fill an entire room and make everyone else start laughing too, about the day he got his road name Hammer because he could drive tent stakes into hard ground in 2 hits where everyone else needed 10, about his loyalty that never wavered, his sense of humor that could lighten any mood, his absolute refusal to ever leave a brother stranded on the side of the road no matter what. Ethan soaked it all in like he'd been dying of thirst, and someone had finally given him water. He asked questions, laughed at the funny stories, cried at the tender ones that showed how much these men had loved his father. Sarah sat to the side, and Derek noticed that several of the club's old ladies, the wives and girlfriends of members, had gathered around her offering coffee and tissues and quiet support. She was crying too, but differently than Ethan. She was crying the way someone does when they've finally been given permission to grieve instead of having to be strong every single moment. After about an hour of stories, Derek brought out a box he'd retrieved from the back room. "Ethan, your dad was going to give you something when you turned 12, but I think you're ready for it right now." He opened the box and pulled out a small leather vest, youth-sized and clearly custom-made. It was black leather with Iron Valley MC patches already attached, not full patches because Ethan hadn't earned those and couldn't until he was much older, but a kid's vest that marked him as Hammer's son, as property of Iron Valley MC, as protected and claimed by this brotherhood. "Your dad had this made about 2 months before he died," Bull explained, his voice still rough. "He was so excited about it. He was planning to give it to you for your 12th birthday and start teaching you about motorcycles in the club. He wanted you to grow up knowing the brotherhood, knowing what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself." Ethan's hands were shaking as he reached out to touch the vest. "Dad made this for me?" "Yeah, kid. He made it for you because he was so incredibly proud to be your father, and he wanted you to be proud to be his son." They helped Ethan put on the vest. It was still a bit big since Jake had sized it for a 12-year-old, but Ethan wore it with fierce pride. His small hands kept running over the patches and his face was glowing with something that looked like hope and belonging combined. "Just like Dad's," he whispered with reverence. "Yeah," Derek said, "just like your dad's, because you're Hammer's son, you're Iron Valley family, and that means you always have brothers watching out for you no matter what." Sarah was crying openly now, not trying to hide it anymore. Jake would have loved this so much. He talked about that vest constantly for weeks. He was so excited to give it to Ethan when he was old enough to understand what it meant. Bull approached her gently, his massive frame somehow conveying gentleness. "Ma'am, I want to apologize. We should have found you after Jake's funeral. Should have checked on you and the boy. We failed you both, and I'm sorry for that." "I didn't make it easy," Sarah admitted, her voice breaking. "I moved right after the funeral, changed my phone number. I couldn't handle being around anything that reminded me of Jake. I thought if I could just move forward, if I could just stop thinking about it, the pain would eventually stop. But it doesn't stop, does it? And meanwhile, Ethan has been suffering because I wouldn't let him remember his own father." "Grief doesn't work on any kind of timeline," one of the old ladies said gently, sitting down beside Sarah and taking her hand. "There's no such thing as moving on, just moving forward while carrying the memory with you. And that's always easier when you're not trying to do it completely alone." Derek spoke up then. "Mrs. Coleman, Iron Valley MC would like to make a commitment to you and Ethan if you're willing. We want to be part of his life going forward. We want to tell him stories about his dad. We want to teach him about motorcycles when he's old enough. We want to make sure he grows up knowing his father was a good man who was loved and respected by a whole lot of people." Sarah looked across the room at Ethan, who was standing in the middle of a circle of bikers wearing his father's vest and listening to another story about Jake, actually laughing for the first time in 6 months. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Yes, please. We need this so much. We need you." Over the following months, Ethan became a regular presence at Iron Valley events and gatherings. The Flagstaff chapter adopted him since they were local, but brothers from the Tucson chapter would make the drive regularly to see Hammer's kid and spend time with him. They taught him basic motorcycle maintenance, how to check oil levels and change a tire and understand how an engine worked. Uncle Bull gave him Jake's personal toolbox, the one with Hammer engraved on the side in careful letters. Uncle Wrench taught him to weld small pieces of metal together. Uncle Steele took him to motorcycle shows and let him sit on different bikes. They attended Ethan's school events when Sarah had to work late at the hospital. They made absolutely sure he knew his father's birthday, the story behind his father's road name, his father's legacy in the club and the community. 1 year after that gas station meeting on the anniversary of Jake's death, Iron Valley MC organized a memorial ride in his honor. 86 bikers gathered at the clubhouse at dawn, their motorcycles gleaming in the early light. Ethan rode on the back of Bull's bike, wearing his vest which had been properly fitted now, holding on tight as they rode out in formation. They rode to the site where Jake had died, where the club had placed a memorial marker with his name and dates and the Iron Valley logo. They stood in silence while one brother read Jake's favorite poem about roads and freedom and brotherhood. They revved their engines in unison, 86 motorcycles roaring together as a final salute to a fallen brother who would never be forgotten. Then Ethan stepped forward, 9 years old now and wearing his father's vest with pride, carrying his father's patch that he still kept with him always. He spoke in a clear voice that carried across the assembled brothers. My dad was Jake Hammer Coleman. He was a great motorcycle rider and a proud member of Iron Valley MC. He was the best dad in the whole world. He taught me to be brave and to be kind and to always help people who needed it. He died a year ago, and I miss him every single day. Ethan's voice wavered slightly, but he pushed on with determination. For a long time, I thought I had to forget him, because remembering hurt too much. But then I met Derek at a gas station, and I showed him my dad's patch. And Derek didn't tell me to forget or move on. He told me I could remember for as long as I needed to. He called my dad's brothers, and they've all helped me learn that my dad's not really gone as long as I keep his memory alive and try to live the way he taught me to live. The boy looked at the 86 bikers gathered around him in the early morning light. You've all been like uncles to me this whole year. You've told me stories and taught me about motorcycles and shown up for me when I needed someone. You've helped me understand what my dad meant when he said brotherhood was forever. Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for not letting me forget who he was. There wasn't a dry eye among those 86 bikers. Bull picked Ethan up and held him on his massive shoulders while the club thundered their approval, 86 engines revving in respect for a 9-year-old boy who'd grown up enough to honor his father's memory in front of the men who'd loved him. Years passed, and Ethan continued to grow up surrounded by Iron Valley MC. When he turned 18, he showed up at the clubhouse with a request that surprised no one who knew him. He wanted to prospect, to earn his full patches, to become what his father had been, a full member of Iron Valley MC in his own right. I know I have to earn it, Ethan said to Derek, who was chapter president by then. I know being Hammer's son doesn't entitle me to patches I haven't earned, but I want to try. I want to be the kind of man my dad was. I want to be his son in every way that matters. Derek looked at this young man who was no longer the crying 8-year-old from a gas station, but a confident 18-year-old who'd grown up in the shadow of a great man and chosen to honor that legacy by becoming great himself. You prospect like everyone else, Derek said firmly. No special treatment whatsoever. You earn it or you don't. Ethan grinned at that. I wouldn't want it any other way. That's exactly what Dad would have said. Yeah, Derek agreed, feeling his throat tighten. That's exactly what Hammer would have said. Ethan prospected for a full year. He proved himself through hard work and dedication and the kind of character that Jake Hammer Coleman would have been incredibly proud of. At his patchover ceremony, when they gave him his full Iron Valley MC patches, Bull, who was chapter vice president by then, pinned them on personally with hands that shook slightly. Your father would have been here doing this himself if he could, Bull said, his voice rough with emotion that he didn't try to hide. So I'm doing it for him. You earned these patches, Ethan, not because you're Hammer's son, but because you're a good man who embodies what this club stands for. Your dad would be so proud of you right now. Ethan wore his patches with the same fierce pride he'd worn that youth vest 10 years earlier. And on the back of his cut, along with his road name that the club had given him, Legacy, he'd had one additional patch sewn on with careful stitches. His father's original Iron Valley patch, the one he'd carried for 10 years, the one he'd shown a stranger at a gas station when he was 8 years old and desperate for someone to understand. The one that had started absolutely everything. Because that was the real truth of it all. That grief needed to be honored and witnessed, not rushed past or dismissed. The children who lost parents deserved to remember them, to hear stories about them, to keep their memory alive in meaningful ways. That motorcycle club brotherhood extended beyond death to care for the families left behind when brothers fell. That one 8-year-old boy, brave enough to approach a stranger at a gas station and say, "My dad had patches like yours," could find an entire community of brothers who would help him carry his father's memory forward with dignity and love. The story of Ethan at the gas station became part of Iron Valley MC legend and identity. It was a reminder of why they rode, why brotherhood mattered deeply, why the patches on their backs meant something beyond just leather and ink. It was about being the kind of men who stopped when a grieving child needed them, who told stories to keep precious memories alive, who showed up for their brothers' families even after those brothers were gone, who understood that legacy lived through memory and that no one was truly gone as long as someone remembered them with love. If you've ever lost someone and found community through their memory, or if you've been the person who helped someone else grieve and remember, your story matters too. Because every person willing to honor a child's grief, to tell stories that keep memory alive, and to show up for families who've lost someone becomes living proof that love and legacy continue beyond death, that no one is truly forgotten as long as someone remembers, and that brotherhood, when it's real and true, means forever.